Today marking the celebration of International Workers' Day, known by many as May Day. Now, the holiday serves as both a celebration of workers' rights and also a reminder of the critical role that trade unions, the Communist Party and other labor organizations played in the fight against Apartheid. But in commemorating the day, we also look at the future of work, and to help us understand where our careers might be and what they might look like in the future, we're joined on the line by Alishia Mudaly, who is an HR ingenuity and talent acquisition specialist. Alishia, good morning to you, and thank you so much for joining us on the agenda this morning.
Good morning, Naledi. Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, I think if you come back to South Africa, 15 years ago, when we started to see, social media and Facebook take over the world and all sorts of things, one wouldn't expect that we'd talk about 4IR like such a frightening thing, especially when you start talking about what it's doing to jobs, right? So let's talk a little bit about just, is that fear relevant, right? Are we right to have that fear? When we start talking about the future of work in 4IR, it sounds terrifying already.
Yeah, I think it is very relevant. I think we live in a space right now globally, and it's not just South Africa, where, inflation's on the rise, unemployment's on the rise, and I think the fear is relevant. But I think also we need to start to embrace the change. I think the pandemic has taught us that, and I think it's here to stay, the 4IR space and, the innovation that's coming with it. And we need to realize that it's here to stay. So how do we then adapt to that? Yeah. And I think that's an important question that we need to ask ourselves.
I think over the past 3 years, we certainly have seen some of that adaptation, right? With people learning to work from home and how so much has moved online.
Yes.
We've seen that adaptation, but we've also seen quite a few things happen during the pandemic that have changed the way we work. I mean, there's such a thing as even the Great Resignation, right? Let's just talk about the impact that even the past 3 years and the pandemic have had on the world of work.
Yeah, I think the pandemic was significant, and I think it almost just pushed us forward. I think there's goods and there's bads to it, but the pandemic has forced us to embrace the whole concept of remote working, moving away from the traditional hours and clock watching space. And I think it's taught us that we don't necessarily need to be in our office or 9 to 5 to be productive and efficient. And in the last 3 years, there's been so much of that change. And for me, significantly in the HR space, it's been very much a focus on employee wellness. And I think a lot of companies who have embraced that and who've starting to focus on that have definitely made a significant impact, even on just their productivity and their growth as companies. So it's really about focusing on what the pandemic has done to us as a community, as an economy, and as a workspace, where we've starting to learn remote working. There's a shift from the 9 to 5. There's this kind of gel in with regards to home and work life, and employee wellness has been has played such a significant role as well in that.
Yeah, employee wellness certainly has been a big discussion over the past 3 years. Can we talk a little bit about the sensitive or the vulnerable sectors? Because I think anybody who's watching and thinks the future of work, they want to know which industry they need to be leaning towards and which ones are likely to be in trouble as we move into or further into 4IR.
Yeah. So I think, the significance here is understanding what 4IR is. And really, it consumes the space of automation, of AI, but at the same time, and like you speak about the vulnerable spaces, we need to start realizing that how do we adapt as just human beings, as employees in that space, and as companies in that space? How do we adapt to start working with it rather than against it? And it's that mindset shift. So the industries really that 4IR is booming in is really the healthcare, the manufacturing spaces, the automated spaces. But young people today, the advice we always give them is to look at how you are adapting to it. So for example, there's been a boom in 2023 with AI, in the artificial intelligence space. And, we need to start paying attention to how am I in HR, for example, going to adapt to that? What am I going to do to upskill myself? So, the vulnerable sectors in manufacturing, in the healthcare space, and in the automation space, companies and employees need to start looking at how we are upskilling to work with those machines, to work with with AI. How do we become or have a collaborative approach rather than an us and them approach?
Yeah, one of the things I think I've picked up as we've moved into, more, I suppose, flexible work, right, as a result of the pandemic, is that it is really the smaller businesses that have learned to adapt and be more nimble and actually quite a bit of a challenge for some of the larger organizations.
100%, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. And, I think it's so important now that we start learning to think like the smaller businesses, because they are more flexible, they're more agile in this environment. And we're looking at it globally. The bigger companies are having mass retrenchments, and they're looking at reducing costs. And it's not just about reducing costs. It's the big companies having to think like the small companies, starting to adapt, starting to be more flexible, starting to look at how we can use this environment to our benefit. So what changes are we doing inside those businesses to bring about that flexibility and to start really looking at a thriving rather than surviving mindset? Yeah. And you're 100% right on that, Naledi. It's the small businesses that are adapting quicker. They are they're realizing that we are in a 4IR space, that it's here to stay. Inflation's on the rise. Unemployment, we are living in a country where unemployment is so high. Yeah. How do we adapt to that? Do we embrace the remote working? Do we embrace looking away from the traditional working hours? And how do we move with that time? Yeah,
you talk about unemployment, and I think we need to sit with that a little bit, because the concept of unemployment is terrifying. If you've ever been unemployed, you know just how soul-crushing that really, really is. It's the one thing that everybody wants to avoid. So just before I let you go, Alishia, give us just the top 5 things that I need to be thinking about as a job seeker or even as a job creator to make me relevant 5 years from now.
I think what a significant question. Thank you. So, top 5, I think it's important to look at diversifying your skill set, look at upskilling, look at what's current right now. Definitely start looking at your wellness, your psychological wellness, and how do you adapt to this change as an employee, as a human being. That's the for you, the tip for you. As a company, start looking at thinking like smaller businesses, start looking at collaborating with other businesses, sharing ideas, sharing and creating new and innovative ways of productivity and doing things. And public sector needs to start looking at how do we enable our youth and our unemployed workforce to change with this new space. Upskilling, learning about AI, look at coding in schools, look at AI in schools. How are we doing that? I think those are very important topics that we need to have discussions on and start taking action on.
Yeah, great pointers for us to think about, Alishia. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Alishia Mudaly, then HR Ingenuity and Talent Acquisition Specialist.